before the light comes,
the home begins to come apart. A woman lifts the felt back from the crown of the roof. A man loosens the girth at the right of the door. The walls fold inward, the lattice collapsing on itself like a held breath let go. In under an hour, the place where a family woke, where they slept and ate and were born, is a stack of poles and felt on the back of a camel. They are not fleeing. Nothing is wrong. No storm is coming that has not come 1,000 times before. They are simply moving, as they have moved for as long as anyone can name, as they will move again when the season turns. From the outside, it can look like loss, a house taken down to nothing, a life without an address, without walls that stay where you leave them. That is the picture most of us carry into a place like this. A tent on an empty plain, a thin, hard way of living, half vanished, kept alive out of stubbornness or poverty or the slow weight of the past. Almost none of that is true. The round felt home coming apart in the dark is not a relic. It is one of the most refined answers ever built to one of the most punishing places people have ever chosen to stay. Every part of it is doing a job. Every rule around it is solving a problem you cannot see. This is Mongolia, and to understand it, you do not begin with its emperors or its borders or the size of the empire it once held. You begin with a single, ordinary morning, and the question of why the whole home packs up and moves. The land itself gives the first answer. It is enormous, and it is nearly empty. 3.5 million people spread across a country the size of Western Europe. For long stretches, there is no fence, no wall, no line drawn on the ground that means anything to the eye. There is grass, there is sky, and there is weather that swings in a single year from summer heat to a winter that can reach 40 below. Nothing grows tall here, nothing settles easily. The grass is thin and it is scattered, and it does not renew itself if you stay in one place and let your animals eat it to the root. So you do not stay, you move. And because you move, the home has to move with you. Roughly a quarter of Mongolians still live this way, out on the steppe, in the Gobi, in the northern forests, following animals across the seasons. They are not reenactors. This is not a show staged for visitors. It is the real, daily, unromantic work of keeping a family and a herd alive on land that does not forgive mistakes. And it begins every day in the same place, inside the home that is built to be taken apart. Morning here does not start with an alarm. It starts with sound. The shift of animals outside in the dark. A dog. The scrape of the stove door. Someone rises first, usually the oldest woman in the household, and she does the same thing her mother did, and her mother before her. She lights the fire in the center of the gur. She sets the wide pan over it, and she begins to boil the milk. The tea that comes out of that pan is not what most of the world means by tea. It is milk and water and a handful of green tea and salt. It is closer to a broth than a drink, and it is the spine of the day. The first thing offered, the last thing refused, poured and re-poured from morning until night. The first bowl does not go to a person. She carries it to the door, dips her fingers, and flicks the tea toward the sky and toward the earth and toward the 4 directions. A small thing. A few drops on the cold morning air. an offering before anyone drinks. Remember that gesture. The first tea of the day, given away before it is taken. It will come back. Outside, the work has already begun. The animals have to be milked before they scatter to graze. The cows, the sheep, the goats, sometimes the mare, and the yak, and the camel too. A herd of a few hundred is not unusual. It is not wealth exactly. It is closer to the family's entire savings account, standing on the grass, breathing. Children are up early. A boy, no older than 6, rides out to gather the goats, sitting a horse with the ease of someone who learned to ride before he could properly walk. Because in Mongolia, that is not an exaggeration. Children here often learn to ride at 3, at 4 years old. The horse is not a hobby. It is the oldest tool in the culture, the thing that made the herd manageable, the distances crossable, the empire possible. There is a saying, still repeated, that a Mongol without a horse is like a bird without wings. And so the day fans out across the grass. The herds move to pasture. The men ride the edges, keeping them together. And back at the ger, the women turn to the other half of the work, the half that decides whether the family eats through the winter. Milk does not keep. Not in summer heat, not without refrigeration, not for a family that will pack its home onto a camel in a few weeks' time. So the milk is turned into things that do keep. This is where the summer goes. Fresh milk becomes yogurt, becomes curd, becomes cream skimmed and browned over the fire. It becomes cheese pressed and cut. And most of all, it becomes arul, dried curds, set out in the sun in hard little cakes on the roof of the ger itself, on boards, on any flat surface that catches the light. Walk past a summer camp, and you will see the felt roof studded with drying white curd. It is not decoration, it is next winter, laid out to dry in the sun. Arul heaps for months. It weighs almost nothing. It survives a move, a saddlebag, a 9-month cold. A handful of it is a meal on a long ride. Every white cake on that roof is an hour of summer, saved against a winter that has not arrived yet. Mongolians call all of this, the yogurt, the curd, the cream, the cheese, the fermented milk, by one name. Sagan ide, the white foods. They are treated as pure, almost sacred. Milk is not to be wasted, not to be spilled carelessly, not to be poured onto the ground in anger. It is the thing the animals give freely, and it is the thing that keeps the family alive, and the two facts are not separate. There is a drink made here that has no real equal anywhere else. Irag, the milk of a mare, fermented in a leather bag, churned 1,000 times a day until it turns tart and faintly fizzing and lightly alcoholic. In summer, a herding family might live on it almost entirely, drinking bowl after bowl, eating little meat at all. Which turns one common idea about this place upside down. The image of the Mongol as a great eater of meat is a winter image. In summer, the diet goes white. Meat is saved. It is the milk that carries the warm months, and the animals give it without being killed. By the middle of the day, the camp is quiet. The herds are out. The heat sits on the grass. Someone dozes, someone mends a bridle. The wind, which never fully stops here, moves through the open crown of the ger and cools the round room below. And this is the moment to look, properly, at the home itself, because it is far stranger and far cleverer than a tent. A ger is a circle of wood and felt, and it holds together without a single nail. The walls are lattice sections, accordion frames of thin wood that fold flat and open wide. On top of them sit long, straight poles, each slotting into a wooden ring at the peak. That ring, the crown, is the only rigid part. Everything else is tension and balance, rope, felt, and the weight of the roof holding the walls in place. The shape is not chosen for beauty, it is chosen for wind. A circle has no flat face for a gale to push against. The steppe wind, which can rise to a wall of moving air, slides around a gare instead of striking it. In a land with no trees to break the weather, the home is built to let the weather pass. Inside, a thick skin of felt, pressed sheep's wool, layered against the cold. In winter, more layers go on. In summer, the bottom edge is rolled up to let the air run under. The stove in the center heats the whole round room evenly, and the smoke rises straight out through the crown. One room, no corners, no wasted space. Warm in a cold that kills, cool in a heat that bakes. And that felt does not come from a shop. The family makes it. In autumn, the sheep's wool is sheared, cleaned, and laid out in a great thick mat on the ground. It is wetted and beaten and rolled tight around a long wooden pole, and then it is dragged, behind a horse or a camel, across the open grass, for hours, sometimes for miles. The rolling and the dragging mat the fibers together. The wool tangles and tightens and binds into a single dense sheet. Felt, one of the oldest ways of making cloth known to anyone, made without weaving, without a loom, without a single thread. Only wool, water, pressure, and distance. It is heavy work, and it is usually done together, several families at once, the way a barn is raised in other places. And what comes off the pole becomes the skin of a home. It will hold out a wind that can kill, and a cold that can kill, for years before it is replaced. So the walls of the house are the wool of the herd, worked into cloth by being pulled across the very ground the house will stand on. The home is not simply built on the land. In a real way, it is made of it. The animals, the grass, and the family's own labor pressed into a single warm wall. And the whole thing, walls, poles, crown, felt, stove, beds, the family's belongings, comes apart, loads onto a camel or a small truck, and goes up again on new ground in a matter of hours. That is the thing to hold on to. This is not a simpler house than ours. In some ways, it is a harder problem, solved more elegantly. A home that must be warm at 40 below, cool in summer, standing against the strongest wind on an open plain, and portable enough to carry on an animal's back 3 or 4 times a year. We build houses to stay. They built a house to move. The difference is not backwardness, it is a different answer to a different question. And as the light goes, the day closes the way it opened. The herds come home. They come in their separate streams, the sheep and goats together, the cattle behind them, the horses loose on the edge, moving toward the gare without being driven, because they know the way. The animals are milked a second time, the young are counted, the dogs settle at the door, and the family gathers at last in the one round room. The evening meal is simple, and it is hot. In the cold months, meat, boiled or cooked slow with hot stones until it falls from the bone. Noodles cut by hand, a soup thick with dried meat softened back to life. Everyone eats from the shared warmth of the stove at the center, in a room with no walls to divide them. There is no separate bedroom because there is no separate anything. The single room is kitchen and hearth and shelter and sleeping quarters for a whole family, sometimes for 3 generations of it. The beds line the walls. They are seats by day and beds by night. Privacy, in the sense the rest of the world means it, does not really exist here, and it is not especially missed. At night, the family lies down with their feet toward the door and their heads toward the back of the ger, toward the altar. Even in sleep, the order of the home holds. The stove burns low, the wind moves over the felt, and the roundhouse sits warm in the dark on a plain so wide that the nearest neighbor may be an hour's ride away. And the question is set by the grass. A herding family does not wander. It follows a route it has followed for generations, a circuit of 4 camps, one for each season. There is a winter camp, chosen for shelter, a spring camp for the birthing of the animals, a summer camp, out on the open pasture where the grass is richest, an autumn camp to fatten the herd before the cold. Each move is timed to the land. You leave a pasture before your animals strip it bare so that the grass can recover and be there again next year. You do not overgraze, because to overgraze is to destroy the thing you will need to return to. This is the logic underneath everything. The move is not restlessness, it is care, for the animals and for the ground itself. The nomad is not running from the land, he is managing it on a cycle longer than a single life. The spring camp exists for one reason above all. It is where the animals are born. After the long cold, the herd drops its young in a rush. Lambs, kids, calves, foals, over a few short weeks, into a world still cold enough to kill them. The nights still freeze. A newborn, left out on the grass, can be dead by morning. So the newborns come inside, into the ger, beside the stove, into the one warm room the family owns. A lamb too weak to stand is set down by the fire. An orphan whose mother has died or refused it is raised by hand, fed, warmed, kept alive on the floor of the home until it is strong enough to go out to the herd. For a few weeks each spring, the line between the family and the animals almost disappears. The home fills with the young of the herd. A child learns to feed an orphaned kid before it learns much else. The wealth of the household, the thing that is food and walls and future all at once, is nursed, quite literally, at the family's own hearth. And there is a practice here for the mothers that turn away. A ewe that will not take her lamb is sung to. A herder stands beside her and sings a long, low, wordless melody, a specific song kept for exactly this, until the animal softens and turns and lets the lamb feed. It is not a charm. It works often enough that it has been done for centuries. A song, patiently sung to change an animal's mind so that one small life is not lost to the spring. None of it is tenderness for its own sake. A newborn saved is a future animal. A future animal is felt and milk, and one more margin against the next winter. The gentleness and the survival, once again, are the same act. Push south, and the same logic survives in a place that looks like it should defeat it entirely. The Gobi is desert, gravel plains, dunes, cliffs that glow red at sunset, canyons that hold ice into the summer. It is one of the emptiest-looking places on Earth, and it is inhabited. Here, the animal of choice changes. The camel comes into its own. The two-humped Bactrian, built for a cold desert, storing fat in its humps against the days without water. The gurs sit further apart. The distances stretch. Water is not tapped from a wall, it is hauled from a well, sometimes from far away, and it is never wasted. To the passing eye, the Gobi is nothing, empty, a place where no one could live. But it is not empty. It is precisely, sparsely, expertly lived in, by families who know exactly how much this land can give and take no more than that. The desert is not lifeless. It is fully occupied by people who have learned its limits down to the liter. Now turn north, as far from the Gobi as the country reaches, into a world that could not look more different. In the far north, around the deep cold water of Lake Kovsgol and the forests beyond it, the open steppe gives way to mountain and taiga, and the herds change again. Here, the yak comes forward, heavy, long-haired, built for altitude and cold, giving a milk richer than any cow's. The families of the north make butter and cheese thick enough to carry them through a harder winter than the plains ever see. And deeper into the forest, close to the Siberian border, live a people who have taken the moving life to its furthest edge of all. The Tsatan, the reindeer herders. A few hundred of them, no more. They do not keep the 5 animals of the steppe. They keep reindeer. They ride reindeer, they milk them, they move with them through the high forest, following the moss and the lichen the animals need to graze. And when they camp, they do not raise the round felt gur at all. They raise a tall cone of poles and hide and canvas, closer to the tents of the northern forests, because among the trees, a different shelter works better than a circle built for wind. It is one of the smallest and most remote ways of life left anywhere on the planet. A handful of families in the northern woods moving with a herd of half-wild deer, keeping a knowledge that almost no one else alive still holds. From the camels of the southern desert to the reindeer of the northern forest, the same idea runs the whole length of the country. Match the animal to the land. Move with it. Take only what the ground can give and leave before it is gone. The shelter changes shape. The animal changes. The logic underneath never does. Everywhere across this country, the herd is built from the same 5 animals. Mongolians name them in a fixed order, almost like a verse. Horse, cattle, camel, sheep, goat. The 5 snouts. Between them, they supply nearly everything a family needs. Meat and milk from all 5. Wool from the sheep pressed into the felt of the home itself. Hair from the goats, cashmere, soft enough to sell. Transport and pride from the horse. Hauling from the camel. Even the instruments, even the children's toys, come from bone and hide and hair. Think about what that means. The house is made of the animals. The food is the animals. The clothing, the fuel, the transport, the savings, all of it stands out on the grass, eating. A herding family does not own a home and keep animals beside it. The animals are the home, converted into felt and food and cloth. Lose the herd, and you do not lose your livelihood. You lose the walls around you as well. Winter is the test the whole system is built for. The winter camp is chosen with care, months ahead, tucked against the east side of a ridge or a stand of rock, out of the worst of the wind, where the snow lies thinner and the animals can still reach the grass beneath it. The gur takes a second skin. More felt goes onto the walls. The base is banked against the draft. The stove burns almost without stopping. But most of the steppe has no trees, and so it has no wood. The fuel is dung, dried animal dung, gathered through the warm months, stacked and stored against the cold. Collecting it is often a child's task, walking the pasture with a basket. It burns clean and hot and long, and across much of the country, it is the only fuel there is. A treeless land, kept warm by the animals it herds, the same herd in yet another form. Water, in the deep of winter, is not poured. It is chopped. Ice is cut from a frozen river, stacked outside the gur, and carried in block by block to melt on the stove. Everything narrows, everything slows. The family draws in close around the fire, in the finest insulation it owns, waiting out temperatures that fall to 40 below and hold there for weeks. And this is the whole point of it: the felt, the round shape, the dung, the shelter of the ridge. Not comfort, survival. A single room of wool and fire, standing against a cold that would kill an unprotected person in hours. The home is at its most vital, exactly when the world outside is at its most lethal. Most winters, it is enough. The family holds. The herd thins, but it survives. The spring comes, and the young are born, and the cycle turns again. But not every winter, which is why the greatest fear on the steppe has a name of its own. It is called the dzud, and it is a word with no clean translation, because nothing quite like it happens anywhere else. A dzud begins, strangely, in summer, a dry summer where the grass grows thin and the animals cannot build the layer of fat they need. Then comes the winter, colder than usual, or snowier, or worse, a winter where the snow melts briefly and freezes again into a sheet of ice across the whole pasture. And the animals cannot break through. The grass is there, under the ice, close enough to smell. They cannot reach it. They weaken, and through the long months of cold, they begin to die. Not all at once, but slowly, in their thousands, in their millions, across the whole country. In the winter of 2009 and 2010, a dzud killed more than 10 million animals in Mongolia, roughly a quarter of every living thing the country herded. Whole families watched their entire herd die around them over a single winter. Not some of it, all of it. And it is getting worse. Mongolia is warming faster than most of the planet, nearly 2.5 degrees over the last 80 years. The summers dry harder. The winters swing more violently. What was once a disaster that came once in a decade now comes almost every year. In the winter of 2024, the snow was the heaviest recorded in half a century. 90% of the country lay under it. Millions of animals died again, and the herders describe it the same way each time. The temperature rising just enough to melt the surface, then dropping again, sealing the grass under ice like glass. There is no forced comfort to put on this. A family that loses its herd to a dzud has lost, in a single winter, the thing it took generations to build. The savings, the food, the walls, the future, gone on the frozen grass. And there is nowhere on the steppe to rebuild it quickly. So many of them do the one thing the culture was never built to do. They stop moving. On the edge of Ulaanbaatar, the capital, the hills are covered in gurs, not moving with the seasons, standing still, behind fences, on small plots of city land. Whole districts of them, the gur districts, where herders who lost everything came to start again. The moving home pinned in place, the felt walls that were built to travel, wrapped around a fixed patch of the city. A stove that once burned dung on the open steppe, now burning coal against the winter smog. Nearly half of the capital's people live in these districts. Over the last 30 years, more than 800,000 people have left the countryside for the city, many of them herders or the children of herders, pushed off the land by dead herds and dry pasture, and the simple fact that there was no longer a life to be made out there. It is one of the quietest, largest migrations of our time, and it does not look like the migration this film began with. There is no camel, no felt rolled toward the east, no new pasture waiting. It is a move in one direction that does not cycle back. And here, the numbers behind the herding life come into focus, not as wealth, but as the arithmetic of survival. A family needs perhaps a few hundred animals just to feed itself. To have a little cash, to send a child to school, it might sell 10 or 20 small animals a year. The one real cash crop is cashmere, combed from the goats, but the price paid to the herder for raw cashmere is low, and most of the profit is made far away in the factories that turn it into cloth. Many herding families carry debt. They live, as one herder put it, from one loan to the next. It is not a poor life in the way the word usually means. A family with a full herd wants for nothing essential. But it is a life with almost no margin. One bad winter, and the margin is gone. And so the children are sent to school in the towns, because a life on the steppe now feels like a bet against the weather. One parent stays with the herd, the other moves to the city with the children. Families split across the distance between the old life and the new one. The knowledge that took 1,000 years to gather, how to read the sky, when to move, where the winter shelter lies, passed to fewer and fewer hands each year. This is the pressure the moving home now lives under, not from within. The way of life still works, still feeds, still shelters, from without, from a climate turning against it, and a city pulling at it, and a world that pays little for what the steppe produces. Hold that. It is the weight the ending of this story has to carry. But the steppe has not emptied, not yet. And to see what still holds it together, you have to look at the moment a stranger appears at the door. There are no addresses out here, no phones ringing ahead. A traveler crossing the grass simply arrives. And when a gur comes into view, there is a way to approach it. You do not knock. Knocking is for a door that might be closed to you, and no gur is closed to a traveler. Instead, you call out from a little way off. Hold the dog. Even if there is no dog, it is the announcement. It gives the household time to come out, and it keeps the guard dogs, which are real and serious, from reaching you first. Then you step inside. And here, the rules tighten. Because inside a home with no walls, no locks, no separate rooms, order has to be kept some other way. You do not step on the threshold. The wooden sill at the base of the door is called the neck of the gur, and to tread on it is, symbolically, to strangle the home. You step over it, right foot first. You do not stand in the doorway to talk. You come fully in, or you stay fully out. Inside, everything has its place. The door faces south, always. You move to the left, toward the west, the guest's side. The family sits to the east. The women's work, the cooking and the milk, lives on the right. The men's gear, the saddles and bridles, hangs on the left. At the back, opposite the door, stands the altar, or the family's photographs, the most honored place in the home. You do not turn your back to it. You do not point your feet at it. You take what you are offered with your right hand, or with both. And you do not refuse the bowl of tea or the plate of white food that comes to you almost the moment you sit, even if you cannot eat it, even if you only touch it to your lips. To refuse outright is one of the deepest breaches there is. And now the reason underneath the manners becomes visible, because this is not empty politeness. On the old steppe, a traveler between camps could die, of cold, of hunger, of distance, if no one took him in. So every household fed every guest without asking who he was or where he came from. The full bowl, pressed on a stranger, was not decoration. It was a contract. Feed the traveler today, because tomorrow the traveler is you at someone else's door, with a long, cold ride still ahead. The hospitality that visitors find so moving is, at its root, a survival system. A web of guaranteed shelter spread across a land too big and too harsh to cross alone. You are fed because everyone is fed. That is the only way anyone gets home. Remember the first tea, flicked toward the sky at dawn? Remember the bowl no one refuses. They are the same instinct, the milk given away so that the giving comes back around. In a place this hard, generosity is not a virtue laid on top of survival. It is part of the machinery of it. And when the household gathers, and the strangers become guests, and the guests stay the night, there are certain things a Mongol carries that make it all possible. A man's belt holds a small pouch, and inside it, often, his own cup and his own knife. You arrive able to be fed. You do not burden the household with the need to find a bowl for you. Even the guest comes equipped to make hospitality easy. There is a garment that ties all of this together, worn across the whole country, in the desert and the forest and the city street. The deal, a long robe of a single piece of cloth wrapped across the body and bound with a sash at the waist. It has barely changed in 800 years, because it was already close to perfect when it took its modern shape in the age of the empire. It keeps the wind out. It works on horseback, split for the saddle. It doubles as a blanket and as a pillow for a night spent out on the grass. The sash holds the back straight through long hours of riding. Nothing about it is ornament for its own sake. Like the gur, like the move, like the bowl of tea, it is a practical thing that happens to be beautiful, shaped entirely by the life it has to serve. Once a year, in the height of summer, the whole country puts on its finest deal and gathers to do the three things it has always most respected. The festival is called Nadam, and its games are old, older than the modern nation, older than most of what the world remembers about this place. There are three. Wrestling, where huge men in open-fronted jackets grapple until one touches the ground. Archery, drawing bows of horn and sinew at distant targets. And horse racing, not the short sprints of a track, but long cross-country runs over miles of open steppe. And the riders in those races are children. Boys and girls, some as young as 5 or 6, sent out over the long course on horses that are not theirs. Because in Mongolia, the race is not thought to test the rider. It tests the horse. The child is light and brave, and already at 5 years old, at home in the saddle. What is being judged is the animal, its speed, its heart, its breeding. The horse is the star. The child is only the wind that sits on its back. There it is again, the horse at the center, the animal that a child meets before memory begins and rides until the end. Take away the horse, and there is no herd to manage, no distance to cross, no home to move, no race to run. It is not a symbol of the culture, it is the culture's oldest working part. The country is wide enough to hold ways of life that barely resemble one another. Far to the west, in the Altai Mountains, live Kazakh families who hunt on horseback with golden eagles, a bird taken young, carried on the arm, loosed to take fox and hare across the winter slopes. The bond can last 10 years until the eagle is released back to the wild to breed. A partnership between a family and a wild animal, worked out over a lifetime. And out on the open grass runs an animal that very nearly left the earth altogether. The taki, the wild horse. Never tamed, never ridden, the last truly wild horse anywhere on the planet. Within living memory, it vanished from the wild entirely, surviving only in a handful of zoos. And then it was brought back, bred, returned, and released onto the very steppe it came from. It runs there again now, on its old ground. The name the Mongols give it means spirit, a wild thing, lost, and returned to the place it belonged. On a plain where almost everything is built to move and come back, the herd to its pasture, the family to its ring in the grass, the whole nation to the white moon. Even the horse that was lost found its way home. But the deepest gathering of the year does not come in summer. It comes at the end of winter. At the moment, the cold finally breaks and the light begins to return. It is called Sagan Sa, the white moon, the lunar new year. And for a people who spent the long dark scattered across the steppe, moving with their herds, often unable to reach their relatives for months, it is the great reunion, the time when the whole family comes back together. The preparations begin weeks ahead. The women make booze, small steamed dumplings of minced meat, by the 100, by the 1,000, and freeze them outside in the natural cold. A tower of biscuits is built on the table, stacked in careful layers, always an odd number, because odd numbers carry luck. A whole sheep's back is prepared, the most honored dish there is, and everything white, the dairy, the milk, the curd, is set out, because white is the color of purity and of a clean beginning. On the first morning, the family rises before the sun, and the first act of the new year is the same act that begins every ordinary day. The first bowl of milk tea carried to the door and offered to the earth and the sky. The gesture from the very first morning of this film returned, the small daily offering, now the opening of the entire year. What a family does at dawn on an ordinary day, the whole nation does at dawn on its most important one. Then comes the greeting. The younger members of the family approach the eldest and take them gently by the elbows, the young supporting the old, holding them up. They hold a long strip of blue silk, the kadag, the color of the eternal sky. And they ask, not the usual, "How are you?" but the question saved for this day. Are you living peacefully? They visit the eldest first. Then, in careful order of age, they move outward, to parents, to grandparents, to uncles, to the far edges of the family, across the town and the steppe. Gifts pass. Blessings pass. Old debts are settled and old arguments are ended, deliberately, before the new year begins, so that nothing sour is carried across the line into the fresh cycle. For many of the oldest, this day is their birthday. Age here is counted not from the day you were born, but from the white moons you have seen. To grow old is, quite literally, to have watched the winter break, and the family come back together one more time. And so the year turns. The reunion ends. The families scatter again to their herds. The spring camp fills with newborn animals, and the summer comes, and the milk runs white, and the curd dries on the roof. And the whole cycle that this film has been circling comes back, at last, to the thing it began with, the move. It is not casual. The decision of when to move a home is one of the most careful a family makes. The head of the household watches the sky. He consults a calendar, the old lunar calendar, thick with auspicious and inauspicious days, the same calendar used to choose a wedding day, or the day to open a business, or the day to cut a child's hair. He waits for a day that is clear and cloudless and lucky. Days before, he rides out to scout the next camp, to be sure the grass is ready and the water is close. And when the day comes, the family does something that might seem strange for a day of hard labor. They put on their best clothes, because moving the home is not a chore, it is a passage. It is the household carrying itself whole from one part of its life into the next. And you do that in your finest deal. The work has an order, and the order is old, and it is followed exactly. The felt is taken off the crown first, rolled back in the direction of the new camp, the home already leaning toward where it is going. The girth at the right of the door is loosened, the roof poles come down, the walls fold, the lattice collapses. Piece by piece, in sequence, the home is reduced to a load. And through it all, small rules are kept that a stranger would never notice. No animal is allowed to cross the bare ground where the ger stood while it is being loaded, because to let one pass is to risk the load shifting, coming unbalanced on the road ahead. The crown, the sacred ring at the peak, is not loaded until everything else is on. It is taken down last, and it travels last, and it will be the first thing raised at the other end. The stones of the hearth, the three that hold the pot over the fire, are lifted and carried toward the new place. The front stone is moved first and set down, pointing the way, opening a path for the fire to follow the family to the new ground. Every one of these acts is doing something. Some of it is engineering, the load order that keeps a home stable on a camel's back across open country. Some of it is older than engineering, a way of moving not just wood and felt, but the hearth, the center, the living heart of the home, without breaking the thread of it. And then the camp is gone. The family rides out. The herds move ahead in their separate streams, the animals so used to the route that they need almost no guiding. Because the move is not a journey into the unknown. It is a return to ground they have used before, to a spot they camped in last year and the year before that. And here is the last, quiet piece of the whole system. When they reach the old winter ground, they will find the mark still there, a ring pressed into the earth where the ger once stood, a circle that the grass has not fully closed over, a scar a full year old. Out here, that ring is a kind of law. There are no fences, no deeds, no lines on a map that any herder would recognize, and yet the land is shared without war over it, because of an agreement written nowhere and honored everywhere. You do not camp where you can see the ring of another family's ger. That patch is theirs. They will be back. The mark holds their place. It is a system of ownership with no paper and no police. A whole country's worth of grass, divided and shared and returned to, year after year, held together by nothing more than a ring in the ground and the agreement not to take another's place. The most portable people on earth, keeping the most durable promises to one another. And so, the home goes up again. On the far ground, in the finest clothes, the crown is raised first, the sacred ring lifted into the air. The poles slot in, the walls open, the felt is drawn over. The stove is set in the center, the fire lit from the hearthstones that traveled ahead. And by dusk, the family is inside a home that is warm and round and standing exactly where a home stood a season ago, as if it had never left. The whole home packed up and moved and became itself again on new ground. Look back now at the family in the dark at the very beginning. The felt rolled back, the walls folding, the house reduced to a stack on a camel. And ask again whether that was loss. It was the opposite of loss. It was the home doing precisely what it was designed to do. A house that can die on a patch of overgrazed grass is a fragile thing. A house that can rise anywhere and follow the water and rest the land behind it and return. That is not fragile at all. That is a home built to outlast the ground it sits on. We tend to measure a home by how firmly it stays put, by its walls, its foundations, its permanence. The Mongol measure is different. Here, a home is measured by how well it moves, how completely it can be carried, and how faithfully it can be raised again. Whether it can go on being carried is the open question now. The winters are turning against it. The city is pulling at it. The children who once learned the sky are learning classrooms instead. Nobody knows how many more times the felt will be rolled toward the east, how many more rings will be pressed into how much more grass before the pattern finally breaks, or whether it breaks at all. For now, it holds. Somewhere on the steppe tonight, a gur stands on ground that still carries last year's ring. A stove burns in the center of a round room with no corners. A bowl of milk tea is pressed on whoever walks in from the cold. And in a few weeks, or a few months, when the grass thins and the season turns, the whole home will come apart in the dark and load onto a camel and move, the way it has for 1,000 years, toward ground it has used before, not knowing how many times are left. Thank you for traveling with us across the steppe. If you would like to keep making these journeys, subscribe and stay a while. Until the next one.